can no longer handle a gospel or a life that is grape juice and plastic glasses. She said, I need wine and chalice. I need that to be my gospel. I need that to be my life. I need it to burn a little as it goes down. Wow,
I was writing because I'm going to do a webcast in 2 weeks and inviting people to come up and supper and hang. And I was figure out how I was going to tell people what I want to do. Like I want to kind of cue them up, but not just open it if I talk about it. And it was, do we have to, I don't think we do, but do we have to choose between church and being a disciple of Jesus?
You know what? The issue is we need to stop choosing to make those different, right? Like that's the problem. The church has found a way to exist apart from discipleship, and people believe they found ways to be disciples without the church, and that very separation of them is probably killing both parties. Church needs to be discipleship shouldn't be, followers of Jesus shouldn't be threatened by the church. There is a real worry that you can just become land in a church and become an old wineskin. It shouldn't be that way, but that's our track record, isn't it? Think about the YWAMers.
And they talked to them and welcomed them and prayed for them. And when I stood up and I said, you guys realize that Jesus completely identifies with you? And then Suzanne said, I don't just mean that he, he's for you. And then when I talked about how he chose to be a political refugee, I watched people start to weep. Because suddenly they weren't just tolerated, they weren't even beyond tolerated, whatever the next step is, accepted. It was, he is with us and chose to be with us historically. And I think that that's a big part of the good news to the poor, that we need to go in and not speak down. It's why when I take people a few weeks ago to the garbage dump, Westerners, and I said, by the way, we're not taking Jesus to them. And then it was perplexed, but you know the answer. Yeah. He's already there waiting for you.
Yeah.
Good news to the poor has got to be more than it's a project or it's an emphasis or a focus. It's got to be tied in with this incarnational, profound identification, I think. And when that becomes authentic and real, something happens among the poor that brings them home.
All right, let me run some theology by you then, because I think it serves what you're describing, but it's deeply embedded in the church fathers and in the New Testament. There's this idea, I believe it's a true idea, that Jesus, in Jesus' incarnation, Catherine Tanner says Jesus assumed every element of the human condition, and in assuming it, and only in assuming it, he overcomes it. So, for example, he doesn't actually overcome temptation until he has to face it. So he faces human temptation, and it can't take him, right? He assumes human nature and completely, and then he overcomes all the fallenness of that human nature. He even assumes sin, not by sinning, but by bearing our violence against him, and he takes that on himself, and then he even assumes death, and then overcomes it. So it's in the act of identifying with us in the incarnation. that he saves humanity. And I'm thinking, and there's an element in which only Christ can do that, but there's also another side to that where he's the first fruits. And so he calls us to assume, to identify, to participate. So the gospel becomes participation in the plight of one another, you and me. And my friend Nathan Rieger puts it this way: he likes to bring together the hidden treasures in those who are broken, alongside the hidden brokenness in those who are rich, and bring them together around a mutual table where we come together as a body. And so again, it's this. Suddenly you realize I actually have real solidarity with someone. This isn't just a charity case here.
And now you're touching on something that is huge for us, because the church in the West, let's say here in BC, there are some churches that kind of ignore the poor. But more and more there's churches that say, oh no, we need to help take care of the poor. But there's not solidarity. There's charity. I mean, charity isn't bad, but it's not.
You can go off for a week or two on a journey with you, for example. And I remember there being real resistance to that at one time, because it was like this vacationary thing, and you're just popping in and out and whatever. And I believe that missions works like yours have overcome the problems of that by creating long-term relationships with long-term goals. And I know we've experienced that in our church with some of the places we've gone, where 15 years later, these are still our friends, and we have two-way traffic between projects, and we can actually say, look at what this community looked like, a dozen years ago. And if you're willing to have an actual relationship rooted in the local, churches and the places you're going, then you'll see a city transform. You'll see a community transform from sort of cardboard box slums into a place where there's some infrastructure and healthy water and so on.
Actual relationship.
Yeah,
that's the key.
These are your friends, aren't they?
I was in Seattle 2 nights ago preaching, and someone who's traveled with us a couple of times showed up. It wasn't her church, but she showed up, and we had a lovely time. And I said, I am so glad that you persisted with us, because you see, about 1.5 years ago, she came with us on a journey, and for 2 days we were in a particular town, and something just hooked her. And she got home and she kept saying, what about Kelowna? What about Kelowna? What about Kelowna? And she gave to help a little bit, to what she could do, feeding some kids. What about Kelowna? And it has led to, as I think right now it's our biggest transformational project. But what created it was relationship. She had particular individuals that she was interacting with and maintaining relationship with. That's the thing. That's why we must be relational about the poor and not be project driven. Even in our towns, we must be. Because, as you say, we touch our own poverty. I think it's.
But she'll never be the same. They might be better off, but she'll definitely never
be the same. And in fact, when she saw me yesterday, Sunday, she's talking about new ideas she has, because something has just ignited in her heart. But it was relational. It wasn't, wow, we're going to do more and more. It was just, we got to help them, and then it started to expand from there. And excuse me. So it has to always come back to relational stuff. It has to come back to the word we keep saying today, incarnation. I feel like I think we're hitting a wall in the church that I call it theoretical Christianity. That's a bit of a coarse statement. It's finer tuned than that. But theoretical Christianity is not interesting to people anymore.
Right.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think we were mistaken in identifying that as institutional Christianity, because what we were smelling, what you're describing is theoretical Christianity. We were kind of blaming on it being institutions, but then our reaction has just simply been to leave the institutions, and now we're on our own, sort of spiritual people who aren't connected and now can't go and do anything actually anyway, except maybe hang out with our friends at the pub and talk about Jesus a little bit. The institution's not the problem. That's about gathering and organizing and creating plans and so on. Impact Nations in that sense is an institution. But it's not theoretical, right? And especially when an institution, like if it gets theoretical, then the institution becomes something else, and it can become abusive, and people then walk off wounded. So if we're not going to be theoretical, and if the institution's not going to rot, do you have a better adjective then? What do we need to be? What kind of Christianity is this?
That's a really good thing. Yeah.
Incarnational.
Incarnational. You said that. I think incarnational, which is to say that we he who hears my words and puts them into practice.
Yeah.
And he who hears my words and believes them and says that was great, but never gets around to the discomfort of having Christ's words change our practices.
Yeah.
They live in the delusion that he calls building your house on the sand.
Yeah. Well, the theoretical element is that I can just become a Christian by praying a prayer.
Yeah.
And now maybe I'll go help some people, and maybe I won't. Irrelevant. And I just think that's so off. It's not about becoming a Christian, it's about becoming Christian. And you become Christian by incarnation. You become Christian by taking on the likeness of Christ as you cooperate in his ministry, as you cooperate in his grace, and so I look at the Beatitudes, and then this is a process of becoming a Christian that you cannot accomplish just as theoretical Christianity. It is the Jesus way, the lived way.
Yes. Well, in fact, talk a little more about that. Let's talk a little more about that whole issue of becoming a Christian by praying a prayer. Brad, I've spent a lot of years in towns and villages and everything, and having people come to Christ. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad. I'm not turning my back on that. But I don't really see that. It would surprise some people. I don't really see that as the moment of conversion or something. I think it's an invitation into a process. And just saying, okay, I want to pursue the process.
Right.
I've been spending a lot of time. We talked last week. I've been spending a lot of time in Matthew again, and still, and there isn't a hint of salvation is based on a prayer that you pray. Yeah. In fact, he says the opposite in chapter 7, right? He says, people come and say, yeah, but we did all this stuff and we did everything, and he says, but I didn't know you. Go back to the relationship again. What do we do with that? What do we do with the being Christian as opposed to a moment where we become a Christian? What do we do with that as guys living in Canada?
Yeah, I like that you regard it as an invitation to a process, and then you can start creating parables about it. Would you really say that someone who says, yes, I will come to the banquet, but doesn't come to the banquet, is now a Christian? Well, they're saved. Or I sort of almost see it in stages where, that's just the very beginning, where let's say Jesus invites us to his banquet. We say yes, we come in and we now dine with him, with the rest of the sinners, the tax collectors and so on. And then at some point he gets up and says, all right, now follow me. And then we're like, actually, I just kind of wanted to stay at the banquet. I was enjoying the banquet. And what do you mean follow you? And then off he goes. If I don't get up and follow him, am I becoming Christian? Or so yes, of course we want to say the sinner's prayer, or of course we want to get baptized. But that's walking out the door into this new life. But you need to live the new life to fulfill the intention of what Jesus, man, I think.
I absolutely agree. And you touched on the great dividing line. Are we going to follow or not?
Yeah.
And you know, one of my, not exactly a frustration, a point of discomfort is where when we lose the sense of mission, we are the guys at the banquet saying, but I just want to stay here because this feels good.
Yeah.
I like singing the songs. I like this living room. I like these friends. None of those are bad things.
Right.
God's not against singing, friends, or comfortable places. But you can't hold on to that and follow, as Jesus said, if you're going to be my disciple, you got to be where I am. And I think we're both convinced that by example and by his teaching where he is, he's out among people who are in desperate need for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's say I know there's different models to this. So there's a model that says, following him is going out and meeting people's needs where they're at. Others would see it as going and welcoming people to come to the banquet as well.
Yep.
Well, then okay, let's do it.
Yep.
If the banquet, if what we have for the poor and the sick and the broken is all that is in the building, then or in the structure, fine, as long as we're bringing people to receive that.
As long as we continue to be inclusive and seeking, which is what Jesus was.
Yeah.
Which means whenever they come in, how many groups have you and I been in where things just get comfortable and then a couple of new people show up and it's not comfortable?
Yeah. Well, good measurement for people, and actually it's better than it was 20 years ago, for sure. Maybe because we're just a little more worldly now. But I remember there was a time when I thought, my family doesn't have a single unbelieving friend. Not one. Even when we would go do mission, it wasn't to invite them into a relationship with us. It might be actually to touch them and to tell them the good news. We'd go that far because we were soul winners, but if they didn't bite, they weren't really friends. So then you had the friendship evangelism movement. Yeah.
So let's go back. Almost in a summary, I guess, what makes the gospel good news? You asked me the question. Let's back at it again. What is good enough news about it that it's the great dividing line in life? It's the ultimate issue. So what makes it that good?
Yeah. My answer to that has shifted through the years. To me, what's making it remarkably good news these days, as I think about it, is that this does not depend entirely on the broken person's response or the lost sheep's response. I'm thinking of the parable of the Good Shepherd who leaves the 99 to go find the one. It says in the gospel that the Good Shepherd goes to find them. He goes seeking them until he finds them. So there's a relentlessness that I'm discovering now that he is just simply never going to stop that pursuit. That's very good news. Second, it's not entirely dependent on how responsive someone is. The one in the brambles, the one down in the ditch, the one who doesn't even know that there's another way. We're seeing it's such good news that Jesus is now going and finding those people without them crying out. Somehow that's connected in my mind to when you go to Africa and you go to a prison where somebody's been in jail 10 years because they can't come up with the $30 fine. They are not thinking they're getting out. They have no hope. They're in despair. They're not even thinking they need Jesus. It's not up to them. It's up to Jesus. But then he's looking for partners. And I think that's another element of the good news. That for those of us who've come to Christ, we are finding out that Jesus wants partners in what he's doing, and that when he finds me as a partner, finds you as a partner, or someone who goes on a journey, it's not just that it's up to you. Now you have a divine partner. and then anything can happen. So you bring your 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and people who didn't even know they're hungry are going to get fed something that will change their life. But also you will find out that, wow, I didn't have to go be the 5 loaves and 2 fish activist. There's heaven's resources backing me up. To me, that's like stunningly good news. Not just a start.
It's a good start. And yes, it is. And as you've heard me say, as I'm starting with halting steps, I'm starting to sometimes recognize like the rhythm of Jesus. And when we walk in the rhythm of Jesus, this incredible multiplication, like you just alluded to in the prisons, for example.
Yeah.
You know, we started with getting a few women and children out, and it just multiplied. And it didn't multiply because we went harder and faster, we got better strategies.
Right.
One day we get a phone call, guess what? The president has pardoned 6,000 people.
6,000
In a day.
In a day. So I'm thinking Isaiah 58, when that became a real important gospel text for me. I feel that Jesus looked at that text as one of his formative mission statements, and it became a mission statement for us. But initially, when we read in verse 6 that the true justice is about breaking the cords of the yoke and setting prisoners free, we sort of did it as like a spiritual warfare thing, right?
Yes, exactly.
And it's like, no, actual prisons too, you know?
That's exactly right. You know, when I look at my my journey over almost 4 years, and Luke 4, 18 and 19 has just been central for me since I got saved. And recovery of sight to the blind.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, the only way I could hear that and understand that was spiritual blindness.
Yes.
Oh, I was blind, now I see.
Insight.
And then we started to see God opening eyes. So you'd think I would have made the jump to freedom for the prisoners. No, I'm still back at, well, they're just bound up inside. And except that it does mean freedom to the prisoners.
Yeah, and they're completely, they're not to be divorced. And this is where righteousness and justice, spiritual salvation and physical salvation, they just, it's a peculiar Western thing that we've divorced them. Sometimes we even blame it on Greek dualism. Well, how about North American dualism? Right? English dualism.
Yeah.
Where in Hebrew, in Greek, in Chinese, in Thai, in all of these other languages, justice and righteousness are the same word. It's only kind of this weird thing in
a
the
whole
West.
bunch of languages.
Many languages.
I didn't know that.
Many languages. Czech, you know, and so there'll be. But somehow in English we've separated it, and then we said, well, the liberals go do the justice thing, and the conservatives go do the righteousness thing. And what a peculiar, and yet that's shifting. The tides are shifting.
It is. Well, listen, thanks a lot. This has been great to just kind of chat and meander and see where it goes.
Always a pleasure.
And I would love to do it again.
Okay.
Bless you.
Well, I hope some of that works. We got some good talking points going. We lost your son.